Our Father, once more we're thankful for the privilege of being able to study your word, to understand the history of these people, to have you teach us. Help us to see there's more to Christianity than just reading books. May we understand that there's a history that we need to see too, that we need to know what really has happened. Bless us now as we wait for your instruction. Amen. Some time ago, we read some statements from Ellen White's pen concerning A.T. Jones. And at that time I wanted to read more, but I thought, no, we better wait. And I'm glad we did wait, because I don't need to go through my compilation of quotes now. Last week, I discovered that Arthur White pulled together some of Ellen White's statements about Wagner and Jones. So I thought maybe we'd just do it the way the church has it. Now, I don't know how many people know that he's done that. And it's kind of hard to find. I didn't see it in the computer. I just accidentally ran into it. But we'll look at his. I think we'll look at his, because my computer has just changed where it was supposed to be. Let me see what happens here. I'm going to have to call it up. Okay, what I'm going to do is go back and read part of what we read that time in past to begin us, to get us into the mood here of what we're doing. We're going to start detailing Wagner and Jones. Not only to see what they said, we saw last time that Wagner in his book about 1888 said absolutely nothing about righteousness by faith. It was all about the righteousness of Christ. So let's look at that article. It's manuscript 34, 1906. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I just want to remind us a couple things that were said. Now, you may recall that she was talking about apostasy in Battle Creek, and in particular, A.T. Jones. And in the middle of her writing, it appears that for no reason, but she had a reason, she says there was a war in heaven. Do you recall that? She discussed the war in heaven. And I thought we would read just that little section, because many people start making up things about the war in heaven. You know, grenades, baseball bats, guns, what. But you know, they didn't have wars in heaven that way. That's a stupid way that men do things. Let's see what she had to say about it. She said, the Lord understood every phase of the turnings and twistings of Satan's work. In order to save the loyal from eternal ruin, he let the matter for a time be acted out. Satan's secrecy and complete denial of his own secret, hidden actions made it appear that he was misjudged and cast reflections upon God. Then there was war in heaven. There she says. Then there was war in heaven. Now this is in the middle of a discussion about the apostasy at Battle Creek, and particularly A.T. Jones. All of a sudden, she's talking about a war in heaven. What's going on here? She says, there, it just shut off. I can't believe it. This little computer just doesn't do it. This man that goes, I've got to start using this little computer for meetings. Okay. So she's discussing now a war in heaven, and somehow she's tying this into what's going on at Battle Creek. So let's see what she's going to do with this. She says about that war in heaven, those who stood with the arch deceiver misstated the words of Christ. That's the war. They misstated the words of Christ. It says they did that to give a false version of all the truthful statements. Then there was the council in heaven, warfare it is called. So the war in heaven was the council where they were talking this over. That's the warfare. She says Satan was expelled. Well, that's the end of the war. How was he expelled? God said leave. You see? It's all words. So you don't need to listen to people who talk about bringing out baseball bats and all that stuff. In heaven, they don't have wars like that. So we see what the war is. Misstating the words of Christ. I wonder if anybody else does the war that way. All right. Now, let's see what she was doing here. She says, right after that war, she says, read Patriarchs and Prophets and Great Controversy. She's talking to the people in Battle Creek about their apostasy, John's in particular. And she says about the war in heaven, how it was conducted. And then she tells them to read Patriarchs and Prophets. Now, you all know what that means. Because that's the first book that you saw that said, wait a minute. There are only two beings in the council in heaven between the Father and somebody else. The Father and the Son. There are not three. And your brain woke up. There are not three. There's only two. The sovereign of the universe has a co-worker. Okay? So that's what Ellen White said to do. When you get in trouble in your with your understanding because somebody's misstating something, go to Patriarchs and Prophets and Great Controversy. Great Controversy 477. God gave His Spirit to His Son without measure. That's just two quotes from those two books, and that's enough to make you see the Trinity can't be true. So she's telling us how to get over apostasy. Let's keep reading. I want to get to why she said this to him. Now she goes down, A.T. Jones, God's eye is upon you. He is taking the temperature of your religious life, and the deeds are passing in review. And I did it again. I don't know if we can do this. Sorry, I have to get back and find this. Okay. It says, I am to bear a testimony that all this scheming and planning and devising will decide what would be your character. He is a schemer. She's naming it to him. Scheming and devising and planning. It says if you were permitted to enter the heavenly courts, there would be a second rebellion. She's talking to the champion of what people think he was teaching, righteousness by faith. He did not teach righteousness by faith in 1888. He said the same thing Wagner did. It was justification by faith. Now, he did start speaking about righteousness by faith within a short period of time. He changed. But what we're trying to figure out here is why he changed. The fact is there in the writings. But she is saying here he was a schemer. He was devising and making plans. It's not the only thing she says. We're going to get into it. And she says that if he were permitted to go to heaven with his character, there'd be a war in heaven again. She said there would be a second rebellion. He would do the same thing Satan did. Now, this is our hero we're talking about. Yes, the church has developed a strange thing about Wagner and Jones, that these were the men that stood up and saved the church. Well, I think that's a myth. They did do one thing, and they did it well. They spoke about justification by faith. That's what God had them do. But it is a great mistake in my mind to think that everything else they did was all right. Because we're going to find out it wasn't. And one of the things they did is called righteousness by faith. I'm not going to get into the other things they did. So, we now have been reminded about what Ellen White wrote. And I don't know about you, but to me that seems pretty downright straightforward. There would be a second rebellion if you went to heaven. That's pretty plain. So now I'm going to go to the statement of Arthur White, his compilation of Ellen White writings to Jones and Wagner and to other people about them. So let's see what she had to say, and then let's try to understand what it means to the history of this church once we see the real history. I'm reading from the code ATJEJW, their initials. You can find it in your computer if your computer will bring it up. Mine didn't for several times until I figured out how to get to it. But that's the code. It's by Arthur White. And he entitled his little document, What Became of A.T. Jones and E.J. Wagner? Well, we want to know. So let's begin. He begins by telling us when they were born and so forth. It says Elder A.T. Jones was born April 26, 1850 in Ohio. From 1870 to 1873, he served in the United States Army. He was an officer. He doesn't say that. It says, while stationed near Walla Walla in the territory of Washington in 1873, he was led to the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Walla Walla. That's interesting, isn't it? Okay. And he really enjoyed history. Jones really enjoyed history. When everybody else was off on leave, having a big party, he was reading books. He was always studying, reading history. And he really learned a lot. And it says in due time he became a Seventh-day Adventist and then entered the ministry. And she said, it says in 1885 he became an associate editor of the Signs of the Times. Well, that's a pretty fast move, isn't it? He becomes a minister, editor at the Signs of the Times. Now, Wagner was born in Wisconsin, January 12, 1855, so he was 5 years younger, okay? He attended Battle Creek College. Bang, first problem. Battle Creek College, the apostate college. And he received a classical education. What is that? Yeah, that's the humanities. That has nothing to do with God. Okay, I want to remind you, this is Arthur White writing. This is not Alan White, and this is not real history. This is Arthur White saying what he thinks it is. He was persuaded to take the medical course. He completed his work at Bellevue Medical College. From there, he went to the Battle Creek Sanitarium. He served as a staff physician for some time, but he really wanted to do pastoral work. He wanted to do evangelism. And it says in 1883, he went to help his father, J.H. Wagner, who was the editor of the Signs of the Times. Now we have Jones and we have Wagner together now. Now, Jones many times afterwards said they never discussed religion. He says they did not know each other's views on justification. I find that very difficult to believe. They both worked at the same place for years and never knew what the other one thought. Oh, come on. So anyhow, let's leave that alone for right now. Let's keep moving here. It says in May 6, 1886, E.J. Wagner and A.T. Jones was listed as associate editors. So now let's start working out the details here. Spalding, A.W. Spalding in his book says, they were unlike as garden fruit and apples of the desert, these two. Yet they teamed together. Young Wagner was not even like his father, tall and massive. He was short, stocky, and somewhat diffident. And diffident means he was always pulling back. He was shy. You just couldn't get next to him. So it says, Jones was a towering, angular man with a loping gait and uncouth posturing and gestures. Now, we don't know anything about Jones and Wagner yet, except one was short and stocky and shy, and the other one was a gangly, loping, uncouth postures. What's uncouth postures? Well, I have seen some. I don't think I want to get into one particular story before I knew anything in the Adventist church. A new pastor came, and he sat to give the talk. Before he gave the talk, he was sitting there, and he was sitting there with legs like this, and he was hanging over the chair. He didn't have a tie on, and he looked like he slept in his suit. I mean, I looked at that man and said, that's a minister? Yes, he was a minister. And when I read this uncouth postures, that's the first thing, the picture I saw was that man. Jones, it appears, was the same way. He didn't care about sitting up and doing what everybody else does. So let's go on here. It says, Wagner was a product of the schools, with a leonine head, well packed with learning, and with a saber tongue. Other people said he had a silver tongue. He must have been able to really speak. So it says, Jones was largely self-taught, a convert, found as a private in the United States Army. Well, he doesn't go into the rest of his experience there. Who had studied day and night to amass a great store of historical and biblical knowledge. Not only was he, now this is Spalding talking, because he talked to people who knew Jones. Here's what Spalding got out of it. Not only was he naturally abrupt, but he cultivated singularity of speech and manner, early discovering that it was an asset with his audiences. So he liked pulling the people over with him by mannerisms, by the way he talked, the way he said things. Yes! He was on stage. Are you getting this? These are things that most people don't think about. They just think about the hero that saved the church in 1888. Well, let's start noticing what's really going on. Because we need to know more than we have known in the past. It says the Minneapolis Conference in its aftermath drew both Elder Jones and Elder Wagner into increasing prominence in the work of the church. They became the theologians. We'll see what that means. Here's Arthur White's comment. It was their privilege to lead in a renewed emphasis on the basic Protestant doctrine, just righteousness by faith. This is the way the leaders of the church have always talked since that time. Righteousness by faith, and here is Arthur White doing it. He didn't name it the correct thing, and he knows better. We'll hear him talk better later. But he says righteousness by faith. So if you happen to be reading this article from the White estate, what are you going to think? This is the truth. In 1892, that's just 3.5 years later. It's actually just about 3 years later. Ellen White wrote this. It is quite possible that Elder Jones or Wagner may be overthrown. Now, why would she say such a thing? They just did the 1888 Justification by series, and she said, that's the message I've been saying. It's the first time I've heard it from other people. They did it right in 1888. I have nothing to say. I've never found anything that says they didn't do it right in 1888. But something changed right away. And here's Ellen White in 1892 saying they could be overthrown. She saw something. She knew something. She says, if they were, this would not prove they had no message from God. And that's right. In 1888, they did what God told them to do, and they did it well. They did it well. They both gave some good talks, and I know from what Wagner said that he was right down the line with the Bible. He really understood the subject of justification by faith. We don't have anything from Jones. There are no records. Then Arthur White says this. The Ellen G. White communications to both men through a 15-year period following 1888 reveal that each had weaknesses in his experience and each made mistakes. For 15 years she wrote to them, straighten up. So they were not the heroes of the church, even right after 1888. Something else is going on. In 1884, Elders Wagner and Jones met on April 26, 1886. He's talking about the signs of the times again. And then it says their names appeared jointly as editors for 3 years. In 1889, the Signs lists E.J. Wagner as editor. The father's gone, and now Jones is not an editor. He's just a writer. Elder Wagner then carried the work of editor until May 11th, 1891. What happened in 1891? They got rid of him. They sent him to London. And they got rid of Ellen White at the same time and sent her to Australia. And the only one left was A.T. Jones. The whole time Ellen White was gone, Jones was working at Battle Creek doing his thing. Are you getting the picture? Ellen White is gone. Wagner's gone. And Jones has the whole thing all to himself. All right, let's continue here. It says, through the 1890s, Elder A.T. Jones was much in Battle Creek. He attended all sessions of the General Conference from 1888 to 1905, and he spoke at all of them. He doesn't say that, but that's the way it came out. Ellen White had occasion in April 1893 to caution Jones. Caution Jones regarding extreme views in presentations of the relation of faith and works. Now he's really toning this down. Jones was saying to the people at the General Conference level that works don't amount to anything. You just have to have faith. Because he is now an exponent of righteousness by faith, the way the Sunday keepers say it. He left off talking about justification only. Now he's calling justification righteousness by faith. And I'll have to read those articles to you before we leave this subject. Arthur White doesn't get into any of that. He's just giving us a certain view. But this is enough for us to understand that he picked it up himself, that Jones was known by Ellen White, and she wrote to him about it, about his extreme views. And Arthur White does bring up the fact that when a little girl, Anna Rice Phillips, came up claiming the gift of prophecy, that Jones said, "She's a prophet." And of course, Ellen White, when she got involved, said, "No, she's just not a prophet." But Jones said she was. Now, if people were listening to A.T. Jones, they would accept her as a prophet, and that's a problem. In the Review and Herald, it says that Jones now, instead of speaking to a few of our people at annual gatherings, he will address all of them every week. And Arthur White says it in such a way that you're not quite sure who did that. Well, my reading says that Jones is the one that made that comment, that he gets to talk to all the people every week now. Seems to me he's interested in being in front all the time. He was the editor of the Review and Herald. And of course, Uriah Smith and he didn't agree on certain things. So Uriah Smith became the associate editor. And this arrangement, according to Arthur White, continued until May 14th, 1901, when an adjustment was made. That's an interesting way of saying it. That was a change, not an adjustment. And that change is for a reason. Elder Smith was returned to the position of editor. And according to the way Arthur White says it, Jones was freed to do evangelistic work. No, the real story is that's all he had left to do. But let's read it the way Arthur White says it. At the General Conference session held February 19th to March 8th, 1897 at College View, Nebraska. Now, Lori and I moved there. She was born there, but we moved there for about a year. So I got to know that place. Prescott was the one that started that school. And now Jones and the General Conference are having a thing there at College View. Jones was elected a member of the General Conference Committee. Now, Remember, when you go to the General Conference in these days, it's not the General Conference we know today. The General Conference was 3 men. Okay? And it was a committee. It didn't run the church, it was a committee. So let's keep reading here. It says, he served in this capacity until a most unusual action. He resigned. Sometime prior to the General Conference of 1901. Do you know why he resigned? He was getting in people's hair. They didn't like the way he talked to them. He was rude. He was rough. He didn't care about things. He just wanted things his way. And Daniels told him, you know, you don't need to talk to people that way. You need to be careful. And John said, if you don't like it, I'm gone. He resigned. Arthur White doesn't get into any of this stuff. I don't know exactly what his burden is in this article, but it's enough that you can see there's something going on here. What is it? What is it? It says the efforts in this direction did not in any instance meet with the hearty cooperation that might be expected. That is telling Jones to, let's be brothers, let's be careful here. It says this caused Elder Jones to lose sight of the dignity of his position, to the extent of allowing, as the testimony says, and I read the testimony so I know this is right, it says, an evil spirit cast drops of gall into his words. An evil spirit. Now, I'm going to ask you the question, and you have to decide for yourself based on the little bit we've done. There's a lot more. Does this man have an experience of righteousness by faith? What's going on here? Who is this man? He knows how to talk about justification by faith, because in justification, you don't do anything except trust Jesus. Justification is a gift. You don't work your way to justification. Sanctification is something different. Righteousness is something different. Righteousness is right doing. Is this a right doer? Let's understand this. It says, when mildly reproved by the president of the General Conference for his course and counseled to make the matter right with the brethren by apology, he resigned. See, there it is. He wasn't going to get to do things his way, so he quit. At the General Conference in 1901, the work of the church is reorganized, and it says the field was divided into union conferences, and provision was made for the organization of the General Conference departments. Jones was again elected to the General Conference Committee. They took him back. It says a position which he held until the session of 1905. He took the position, and I've read all his documents of 1901. He took the position that we should have no kings. And he was quoting Ellen White the whole time. We should have no kings. That is, we should not have conference presidents. And he took that position. He's very noisy with it in 1901. And reading his writings, you think that's biblical and spirit prophecy. But as you see what really was going on at that time, and the church's needs, the way he was handling them things just was not right. He says, no conference presidents. And so, a General Conference committee was elected, and they did not vote a president. He made too big a scene. What they did was they said the committee can vote for its own chairman, and he will act as the president of the committee. Okay? So that's what they voted. That's what they did. And A.T. Jones said, okay, that sounds about right. Well, his work took him to the West Coast. He came to California. He became a California boy. And while he was in California, the people liked having the big shot from the East who saved the church, and they elected him conference president. This is the man who just said we should have no presidents. And guess what he did? He accepted the position. He said, I'll be your president. But here's the next sentence. His harsh and domineering spirit soon cost him, the confidence of many of those with whom he worked. He couldn't get along with the people he was the president of. In 1903, put yourself back there. What's going on in 1903? Kellogg. Yes, pantheism. Battle Creek. All that's going on. Kellogg in 1903 invited A.T. Jones to come back there and teach in his college. And so he said, I think I'd like to do that. I'm going to help Kellogg. I'll teach Bible, righteousness at the college. And Ellen White had a discussion with him, a conversation, and she said, don't go. The Lord does not want you there. And what did Jones do? I can handle it. He says, I'll be all right. I can handle Kellogg. God just said, don't go. And he says, I can handle it. Let me ask you something. Does he believe in the spirit of prophecy? What's going on with this man, this hero? Now, I'm not trying to put him down. I'm trying to get people to see that this is the man that primarily during that time was pushing righteousness by faith. He's the one that brought it into the church. And I'm talking about the righteousness by faith that the Sunday keepers believe in. Just believe. The works you can't really do. Well, he's talking, I think, out of his own experience. Here are her words. Letter 116, 1906. In vision I had seen him under the influence of Dr. Kellogg. Fine threads were being woven around him till he was being bound hand and foot, and his mind and his senses were becoming captivated. Kellogg was taking him over. And of course, this wasn't just two humans doing something. The devil is involved in here somewhere. Then she reported this to Brother Jones. Before he went to Kellogg, she could see that his perceptions were becoming confused, and he did not believe the warning given. She told him, you don't believe what God has told you. She says the enemy works in a strange, wonderful way to influence human minds. But Jones was sure I could handle this. In 1905, still a member of the General Conference Committee, he was invited to assist in meeting some religious liberty crisis in Washington, D.C. And so he went. He was asked to go. He didn't want to go, but he went. He went there. But it's a fact. In 2 months, he was back in Battle Creek. He knew he wasn't going to stay there very long, but he didn't tell anybody that. He just went because they were asking him to go, and Ellen White asked him to go, and so he went. But just as soon as everybody had their back turned, he was back in Battle Creek. Now, Ellen White invited him to do evangelistic work instead of being in Battle Creek. And if he had done that, that may have saved him, but he didn't do it. Ellen White was constantly moving people, trying to get them to go to places, to do certain work, that if they did it, the fact that they were helping other people would help them. But in this case, he refused to do the things he was asked to do. This is another letter. She says, Elder Jones, God calls upon you to go into the cities and give the last message. And he was good at that. He could preach. He was a preacher even though he didn't have the experience. It says, look to God for your support as you go. Call the people together, and you will certainly not work in vain. Let your renunciation of self to God. Hold fast the beginning of your faith unto the end. She's trying to tell him, you need to be converted. And later she did tell him exactly that. But he continued in Battle Creek. And this is Arthur White's comment. Under influences he was no match for. Now Jones thought he could handle it. But he obviously couldn't. And Arthur White just flat out says he was no match for that man. He was soon in bitter opposition to his brethren and to the spirit of prophecy. July 23rd, 1904, Alan White talking again. The words and attitude of Brother A.T. Jones at the Berrien Springs meeting in 1904 struck an inharmonious note. And then later she says they ruined the meeting. The things they did there, that we couldn't get the work done that we wanted to get done. December 29, 1905, I send no more testimonies to be read to the Battle Creek Church, to A.T. Jones. For I have evidence that a work will have to be done for him before the Lord will accept his service. God has given him warnings, which he has repudiated, and I am greatly grieved that he has so little spiritual eyesight. Now, we're still talking about Jones. We're not up to Wagner yet. We'll find out she had some things to say to him, too. But we're trying to understand, is this a man to follow after 1888? There are thousands of people in the Adventist Church who follow Jones because of what he did in 1888. And I see that as a grave mistake. Because almost all of those people are Trinitarians, and they're not moving even though they're being talked to. And if you are a Trinitarian, you cannot understand righteousness because you're following the wrong God. I'm sorry to put it just that way. But the Trinity God doesn't believe in righteousness. The Trinity God does not believe in the Ten Commandments. The Trinity God does not believe in obedience. The Trinity God doesn't believe in love. And I can make the list long because I can show it to you in the Scriptures. The Trinity God is Satan. The Trinity God is one person who palms himself off as the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. And that's exactly what Satan does. Continuing. March 12, 1906. You may be surprised to hear the words that you have heard from Elder T. Jones, but I am not surprised. This is the development of the man when the Spirit that is counter to the Spirit of God comes upon him. In him, as he is at the present time, you have a representation of a man who is not under the molding influence of the Spirit of God. Who is the Spirit of God? Okay? The Lord accepts no such demonstrations of bitterness. And then she says it again, read my books, Patriarchs and Prophets. Great controversy. The story of the first great apostasy. History is being repeated. The apostasy that Satan did in heaven is happening in the Adventist Church. That's what she just said. And that was in 1906 she said it. April 2, 1906, during the General Conference at Tacoma Park, Elder Jones' case was again presented to me. After this, I had a long conversation with him in which I pointed out his danger, but he was self-confident and declared to me that Dr. Kellogg believed the truth and the testimonies just as firmly as the rest of us. In this conversation, Elder Jones manifested that which had been revealed to me regarding him, that in the place of receiving the warnings, he was full of self-confidence, that he had exalted himself. What's that mean? He knew more about truth than God did. This is A.T. Jones we're talking about. And in place of being prepared to meet Dr. Kellogg, he had united with him to disbelieve and distrust, and falsely to accuse ministers and others who were trying to save Dr. Kellogg and other physicians who were in peril. I warned Elder Jones, but he felt that he was not in the least danger. But the fine threads had been woven about him, and he is now a man deluded and deceived. Though claiming to believe the testimonies, he does not believe in them. Now, these are clear statements. I don't know how anybody can say that A.T. Jones was a wonderful Christian who was defending and teaching the three angels' message at this time. I don't see how anybody knowing the facts could say such a thing. May 1, 1906, I'm sorry for A.T. Jones, who has been warned over and over again. Notwithstanding these warnings, he has allowed the enemy to fill his mind with thoughts of self-importance. Heed not his words. What did Ellen White say? She is telling the Seventh-day Adventist people, heed not his words. I've never heard this quoted any place. But that's what Ellen White wrote. That's what Jesus told her to write about A.T. Jones. Don't listen to him at this point in his life. It says, heed not his words, for he has rejected the plainest light and has chosen darkness. The Holy One has given us messages clear and distinct, but some poor souls have been blinded by the falsehoods and the deceptive influences of satanic agencies and have turned from truth and righteousness. See? How can a man teach righteousness by faith, the real righteousness, when he doesn't have any? She said he has turned from righteousness to follow these fallacies that Jones is doing and Kellogg is doing and others are doing of satanic origin. June 15th, 1906, Dr. Kellogg controls the voice of A.T. Jones. So here we have it. Jones is now a puppet. He doesn't even have his control of his own voice. Kellogg is his voice. Dr. Kellogg controls the voice of Elder A.T. Jones and will use him as his mouthpiece. And that's exactly what he did. When Kellogg didn't go someplace, he sent Jones. Jones would say it for him. My prayer is, O God, open thou the blind eyes that they may see, and the ears of the deaf that they may hear and become humble. July 5th, 1906, Elder A.T. Jones, dear brother. Oh, she's trying to save this man. Again and again your case has been presented before me. I am now instructed to say to you, you have had a large knowledge of truth and far less spiritual understanding. See, he's got it in the head, but it never hit his spirit. It says, when you are called to the important work at Washington, When you were called, you had need of far more of the humble grace that becometh a Christian. Since the Berean springs meeting your attitude and the attitude of several others has grieved the Spirit of God, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Self-exaltation is your danger. It causes you to swell to large proportions. You trust in your own wisdom. Now she's laying this man out cold. She's not holding anything back now. She did for a long time. But now she's telling the world, this is A.T. Jones. And as she's talking about his wisdom, she says that is often foolishness. Do you remember the counsel which I gave you in my letter of April 1894? This was an answer to your letter expressing deep regret over the part you'd taken in the unwise movement, Anna Phillips. And you appealed to me for instruction that you might ever avoid such mistakes. Now, there was a time when he broke down and he heard it in front of the other brethren. And he says, I won't do that anymore. Oh Lord, help me. Save me, convert me. And the people were crying. Everybody was crying. They said, he's being converted. And Ellen White had hoped that he was really converted. But he went right back to the same stuff. And she says, you couldn't help Dr. Kellogg, for you were blind in regard to his dangers and his real standing. You cannot be a help to him, for you entirely misjudge his case. You consider the light given me of God regarding his position as of less value than your own judgment. That's Jones. He always thought he knew better than everybody else. He had the same problem with the leaders of the church and even with the people he was preaching to. It says, Brother Jones, I have a message for you. In many respects, you are a weak man. If I were to write out all that has been revealed to me of your weakness and of the developments of your work that have not been in accordance with the course of a true Christian, the representation would not be pleasing. This may have to be done if you continue to justify yourself in a course of apostasy. Until your mind is clear to the midst of perplexity, silence is eloquence on your part. I'm so sorry you are spoiling your record. And she's talking about 1888. He did a good work in that year. Yes, Justification. He said it right. She said, I'm so sorry you're spoiling your record. She knows that people are going to say, look at this man. That's the man who said it right back then. How do we know that? Yeah. Because Ellen White knew that's what people would do. And Ellen White tried to tell them, no, what he said there in 1888, that was right. The message was from God in 1888. My heart was filled with sorrow because of the course that J.H. Kellogg is following. And A.T. Jones is following the same course and voicing the same sentiments with a most determined spirit. With a realization, when the realization this comes over me with such force, great sorrow fills my soul. I have before me such a revival of the first great apostasy. She said, I'm looking at what happened in heaven. It's happening again here with us. She says, I'm bowed down with agony that cannot be expressed. It is in Battle Creek that the warnings that are given are entirely disregarded. August 1, 1906. God showed me what he would do for Dr. Kellogg if he would take hold of his hand. But he wrenched himself away. And what we're not being told here is that Kellogg, in front of Ellen White and others, was admonished. Please, give this up. We're brothers. Come back. Be one of us. And He started crying himself. And they thought they had it with him. They said, please, come back. They put out their hands. Come. Be one of us. And he put out his hand. And then he pulled it back. He said, no. No. And he left. That's what she's saying here. She's talking about that. It says, God showed me what he would do for Dr. Kellogg if he would take hold of his hand. See, the hand was put out by people. And Kellogg wouldn't do it. But he wrenched himself away. At the Berrien Springs meeting, the most precious offers were given him. And he wrenched himself away. I had rich agony of heart that seemed as if soul and body were being rent asunder. She was there. She saw it. I have seen Dr. Kellogg exert a hypnotic influence. He knew hypnosis. And he used it upon persons. And at such times the arch deceiver was his helper. Those who sustain him are guilty with him. A.T. Jones is sustaining him. Are guilty with him. This blindness of understanding is a strange thing in our ranks. In regard to A.T. Jones, he has a theory of the truth. Oh, he can preach it, he can say it, he can write it in the books. Let's see what she says. He has a theory of truth which his books express. And he dares not tear up his past experience. He virtually turns away from his former experience by his present course of action. September 30th, 1907. A.T. Jones, Dr. Kellogg, Elder Tenney are all working under the same leadership. What leadership is that? They are classing themselves with those of whom the apostle writes, some shall depart from the faith. We are reading about the alpha of heresy in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. And she just named the men who are doing it. In the case of A.T. Jones, I can see the fulfillment of the warnings that were given me regarding him. She says, it's happened. He's gone. He's listening to the devil now. October 1, 1907. I want to say to you, brother and sister Starr, that at the time that we have so long anticipated has come. A.T. Jones has come to the place where he voices the mind and the faith of Dr. Kellogg. They have now taken a decided stand against the truth. They're not Seventh-day Adventists anymore. And special efforts will be made to lead souls away. They're going to take people out of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. This apostasy has cost us dearly. Warning after warning has been given to these men, but they have set themselves first to deny the messages and then to declare that they did not believe the testimonies. Their work against the truth has been marked by deception, as was the course of Kenwright. Now she's linking him with Kenwright. Many whose sympathies were with Dr. Kellogg have united with him and have departed from the faith. November 11th, 1908, I must warn our people against laboring in any line in connection with A.T. Jones. She warned the church not to have anything to do with him. He is one who has departed from the faith. That's Jesus talking. All during this time, he's preaching righteousness by faith. Are you getting the picture? November 10th, 1911. Elder A.T. Jones, I have given you instruction in straight, clear lines in regard to the perverting influence under which you have placed yourself. Your lips have uttered perverse things. You have denied the clear light of truth and have linked up with strange elements. I gave you a correct statement in regard to your position, but you went on doing the very things the Lord had warned you not to do. It has been a strange course for one who has been enlightened by the Lord as you have been, but you have acted very much like a man who has lost his bearings. Now, I can't go back and review the history at this time, but he's already been disfellowshipped from the church, which he's writing in this. Okay? And before that, he had his credentials taken away. So the church was trying to work with him, but he wouldn't have it, and it kept getting worse and worse until he's gone. When you are converted, your self-sufficiency will disappear, and you will become meek and lowly in heart. When you see and repent of your mistakes, you will be a great blessing in helping others. The destroyer now takes advantage of your self-righteousness to weave into your experience his own ideas and theories. What righteousness does he have? Is it the righteousness of Jesus? She has said it too plainly. Nobody can be mistaken reading her testimonies. He did not have the righteousness of Jesus. He had his own righteousness, which is no righteousness at all. When you are really desirous of uniting with those from whom you have withdrawn yourself, the testimony will be borne that you looked up after you stepped off the platform on which you had previously stood, and that hands were put beneath your arms, and you and Elder Wagner were lifted once more. Oh, now she's mentioned Wagner. They're both gone. So he had his credentials taken away in 1908. No, 1907, excuse me. 1907. And then Jones says, well, I want a hearing. See, he didn't believe it was right. They took away his credentials. So they had a hearing in 1909. After all of the things Ellen White wrote him, and he never changed. He wanted to tell him what a good Seventh-day Adventist he was. But he made such a mess of it that right after the meeting in 1909, they disfellowshipped him. Yeah, that was their response to everything he said to them. Elder A.V. Olson was at that meeting. And he was not a delegate. He was not part of the legal proceedings, but he was there. They invited him just to sit there and listen. Here's what he had to say. Though not a delegate, that says, yes, though not a delegate, I was invited to attend the last meeting. And then he names the people that were there. It says at the pulpit was Brother A.G. Daniels, the General Conference President, at one end, and A.T. Jones at the other end. Before final action was taken, Brother Daniels arose and made a statement in which he said how much he personally had appreciated the fine, faithful, and efficient services that Brother Jones had rendered the cause during many years of association. How he had esteemed and loved him, and how our hearts had been filled with sorrow because of the misunderstanding and conflict that had come in to mar our sweet fellowship and to separate him from his brethren. Then turning to Brother Jones, he made a very tender and touching appeal for him to forget the past and to come back, to stand shoulder to shoulder with his brethren in the service of the Lord. He assured him that we all loved him and that we wanted him to go with us in the march toward the kingdom. Now, something very similar happens now. Let's see if we recognize it. Extending his hand across the table, he said, this is Daniels. Come, Brother Jones. At this, Brother Jones arose. He started to reach his hand across the table, only to draw back. Several times, Brother Daniels continued to plead, saying, with tears in his voice, come, Brother Jones, come. And Jones would reach out his hand part of the way across the table and pull it back again. The last time he almost clasped the hand outstretched from the other side, and suddenly he himself said no. He sat down. The same thing. There were not many dry eyes in the seminary chapel that afternoon. We all loved Brother Jones, and it grieved us to see him go into the dark. He became the editor of a magazine. He published the American Sentinel of Religious Liberty. A lot of people think that was a church paper. That's what Jones put together after he was disfellowshipped. In November 1915, he moved to Washington, D.C., and that was his work, publishing that paper. He began to attend the People's Church, a colored Seventh-day Adventist church. Yes, he joined a Seventh-day Adventist church, but these people had left the regular church already. So it really was not a Seventh-day Adventist church. It was people who had left the Seventh-day Adventist church. It was pastored by F.H. Seeney. There's quite a history to that little church. And so Jones joined that church, and he participated in the work of that church. He joined the church April 15th, 1916. Okay, a year after Ellen White died. In February 1923, Jones returned to Battle Creek for rest and treatment. He's wearing out. He's back to Battle Creek to be treated. And he was making satisfactory progress until in early May, he suffered a stroke. Bang. A few days later, he died. His funeral service was held in Battle Creek. He was buried at Kalamazoo, Michigan. I preached in Kalamazoo, Michigan while I was at the seminary. A brief obituary copied from the Battle Creek Inquirer appeared in the Review and Herald. Mrs. Jones ever remained true to the message. So now we know a little bit more about A.T. Jones, the man that taught this church righteousness by faith, when he should have stayed with justification by faith and righteousness by Christ. Oh, I haven't said that before, have I? Yes, that's the only kind of righteousness anybody's ever going to get. It's not by their faith. It's by Christ. Righteousness by Christ. The righteousness of Christ. The Lord our righteousness. In Hebrew, that says Jehovah. Yes, the Lord is Jehovah in the Hebrew. Sedekina, our righteousness. Jehovah, our righteousness. Jesus is Jehovah. All these things we're missing. They're everywhere in the Bible and in the Spirit prophecy. We need to get back to the real thing. It's coming. The Bible says it's coming. Jesus cannot fail. He's going to have a people that do it just the way he said and the way he gives it to them. It's coming. And we have to decide we're going to be one of those because we're the only ones that can decide it. But you have to believe he's going to do it. Okay? Jones didn't believe. Wagner didn't believe. And yet that's what they talked about all the time. Believe. They never got it. We'll do Wagner next time. Father, how sad that the men you used in 1888 were the ones who left and were used for a different purpose after that. Help us to see that even these men that you called to say the truth in 1888 failed. They lost it. They became agents of the enemy. How much more should we be careful? Yes, we need to each one consider, if the mighty fall, who are we? Bless us. Teach us. Give us the humility and the meekness of Jesus, that we may stand in that day. We thank you. Amen.